All right, we are live at 5. Getting used to this. It's Wednesday evening in Dublin, 5 p.m. Shane Moran is in the hot seat today, and he joins me from Lisbon. And I believe it's also 5 o'clock in Lisbon. So Shane, welcome.
Thanks so much, Alan. Yeah, thanks for having us. Nice one.
Not at all. And today we're chatting about branding and why brand matters when scaling an organization. So Shane brings more than a decade of experience in design, communication to help clients connect with the right audience because the world only knows what you tell it. And I just want to tell you a quick story before we get into the questions. I met Shane when I started my business 3.5 years ago now. I was at a startup event in Dublin, a startup ecosystem event. And Shane was at the back of the class with me, and he asked a couple of good questions and very curious. And I like that curiosity. But at the end of it, when we decided to connect, he handed me a beautifully crafted business card. It was very thick. It was what's the word?
That was a letterpress 450 GSM. Yeah, it was a really nice card.
Okay, so you can see we're speaking to a brand expert because he knows exactly what the business card was. But anyway, it impressed me. I realized straight away through his questions and through the card and the design that I wanted to work with him. And I also realized early on in my business that I didn't want to get straight into consulting. I wanted to sort of get my branding right. And I didn't know a huge amount about branding at the time, but I knew that I needed to get it right. So I engaged with Shane, thinking that we'd get a brand, we get a logo, we get some stuff that can make my website look good. And I got a whole lot more through the process. We brought the values in. We got a brand manifesto, first time I'd ever heard of that, but a long document that I read with a story around what the brand is, the characteristics, and also the brand guidelines, which are still referred to today. Every time I do a post, I make sure that the logos are sitting in various sizes. And, Shane sometimes pings me from time to time if I get it wrong. So Shane, welcome. And I'm really great. It's great to be chatting to you again. And I know we've kept in touch, but we've never really done a live. We've got 40 people registered today. So that's quite nice, or 38. And I'm sure a few people will drop in and drop off. And just inviting people to ask a couple of questions. If you've got a question around brand and scaling, get onto us. If we can't address the question in the 25 minutes that we've got, we will get back to you afterwards, or connect with us, connect with Shane, connect with me, and ask us some questions. So Shane, let's get into it. It's brand scaling. I mean, the first question I have really is around how does a well-defined brand contribute to the scalability of a company?
Well, first off, again, thanks, Alan. It's nice to hear and reminisce about the old times, which was like 3 years ago, which it feels like way longer. I mean that in a nice way. But the world's a different place in some ways. And that was interesting because that was the tail end of, it was just the start of COVID. So things like business cards were still a lot more relevant then. And now they're back, which is really cool. And I think that ties in nicely to what you're saying, which is a brand strategy and then a business that's scaling. Like a business card is, as an example, that's a touch point. That's an interaction that a person has with a business or entity or product or service. That's a physical example. Like a scale up is a lot more pressure on a business. It's the increase in volume in many ways, and it can really be a test to that business. And I think having a brand strategy in place means you've already done a lot of work in terms of this is a useful business asset that is going to help the business scale alongside, because the business is increasing in many ways pressure, but by showing up consistently, that builds trust. And I think that's what a solid understanding of what makes a business different in a meaningful way, understanding the purpose of the brand, understanding the target audience. And I think when you have all those things nailed, then it means you're meaningful to the right kind of people that you want to attract more of. It doesn't necessarily have to be customers. It could be new talent that you're trying to attract. It could be investors. It could be people within an ecosystem of characters that are influential to the success of the business. And I think having a brand strategy alongside the business scaling up means you're starting off on a healthy habit of building trust from the very start.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think as businesses scale, I mean, that scrappy startup phase is very much about product market fit. It's about getting that product out there and obviously about fundraising and just trying to get some traction. But I think the interesting thing here is that trust from the outset, and that brand being consistent as you scale. So you spoke about whether you're hiring people. I think brand counts. I mean, is it something that people need to over index on, or is it just another one of the 100 tasks that a scale up needs to focus on every day?
Well, I'm a big believer in like it's progress, not perfection. That really it's all well and good, and it's huge to have a vision for the business where it goes, but it doesn't have to be like a cage. That perfection, a certain outlook means a brand strategy that's solid enough on its understanding of why the business is different, gives the business a lot of room to breathe and expand, and then also complementary. It means if you want to expand the brand to do different objectives, then you've already got a solid foundation of showing up consistently, and consistency is how we build trust, not just as a business, but as like if we're with our friends or family, by showing up consistently, you're reliable. And what's really interesting these days is people demand a lot more from the product or service that they use in everyday life, and I think that expectation is expected with employers as well. So nailing and really understanding what makes the business different can be far-reaching benefits for the business. But a start is better than no start at all.
Yeah. And Shane, tell me, like, what's the process in terms of developing a brand strategy? Because I mean, obviously, these companies are they're getting started. They have a good vision, right? I mean, we get that. If you look at the tech startups, they're changing the world, they're disrupting. They have a very clear vision, and that founder, more than anybody, drives the culture. They drive the vision and everything. So, the brand strategy piece, is that the founder working with an agency like yourselves? And I'm going to get into, hopefully before the end of this meeting, the bloody lovely branding name, because I quite like that and it's interesting, and I know you're purposeful in terms of the work you do. But it's that brand strategy. What does that look like? Because I think people understand what a business strategy is. They go out, they do their competitor analysis, they try and find the blue ocean, if you want to use the MBA speak, but they really are looking for a different way to disrupt and find the way. What is a brand strategy?
Brand strategy is it's the understanding of all the moving parts, and like a business is made up of many moving parts, and having a solid brand strategy means that you know why your business is different in a meaningful way, and you can articulate that across all channels. It's the understanding of the purpose of the brand, why it's different. Like a brand is effectively a reputation, and branding is the intentional shepherding of that brand. So it's expressed in a consistent and convincing and authentic way. You mentioned there, does the CEO effectively just, point and everyone just does it? In some businesses, as we know, CEOs say jump and then everyone can just generally say, how high. But we understand that kind of top heavy kind of leadership doesn't permeate well through all the different internal structures. And a lot of the time, how it would work, depending on the size of the business, coming in as a brand strategist, I usually end up, or I promote the idea of understanding the industry, the competitive landscape. So looking at competitors to see, not from a place of like worry or concern, but really a consultant's value is that it's not so close to the problem. So you or I can come in and help the business point out what competition are doing. So then it's usually, this is the door opener to the idea that maybe there's a better way to do things. And then to really nail the brand strategy from the start, we do this thing called discovery. And that's something that you and me did. And it's also what we would do with the leadership team, or really the decision makers at a certain level. Ideally, it's the kind of C-suite table that we want to have a seat at. And really, in that discovery session, and with you as well, it was like about bringing in the customer into the room, because when you're dealing with a bunch of professionals who have 101 jobs to worry about, they're often so close to the issue that they can't see from an outsider's perspective, or even from a customer's point of view. So I think bringing a customer's point of view and being the ambassador for that within the kind of C-suite, that's huge. So
Yeah.
I mean, the business is more than the CEO. It's all the other players, and it's not a democracy, of course, but it can be outlined. What is the purpose, vision, mission? You know yourself, the kind
Yeah,
of notes
exactly.
here for a lot
Yeah.
of language. And
But you know, it's kind of interesting you talk about that. I mean, I think, I remember that exercise we did, and I remember coming to you saying, right, Shane, listen, I have some clear colors I want to use. I want sharp lines. I want everything. And what I got at the end was completely different to what I had envisioned or dreamt up or even thought about in terms of even a logo or design or even a font. And you brought the customer in. And I think that was important. You kind of said, right, I kind of know what I think they need. And collectively, we got, you brought in some of the styles that I wanted, but you brought them in a way that the customer appreciates. You also brought in, and I think this is a very clever way that designers do or architects do when they're designing, is they bring in maybe an extreme, what I definitely won't like. So it's kind of, like the eye test. They show you a very, very sharp number and then a number that you can't see. And I quite like that, is bringing optionality in so that you can actually hone in on the ideal fit. And then I think the other thing that I wanted to chat about was, I suppose, brand integrity during this rapid growth. So you spoke about trust, and you spoke about, it's not just CEO top level. That doesn't happen anymore. Business has changed. It's all about empowering people. It's all about creating leaders right throughout the organization. And you want those leaders to live your brand every day, because the brand is the personality, right, of the company. It's not a marketing activity. It's more a feeling. It's a personality. So, like, in your experience, like, what are the key challenges that companies face maintaining brand integrity during rapid growth?
Yeah, I think it's, as you said, the integrity, maintaining that consistency across all channels. So a channel is a medium or platform in which some people will be exposed to the business. That the obvious things like social media channels, content in various manners, and those kind of things. Content, for example, are a business asset. We use content to create awareness and promote, the efficiency of the brand or what have you. Where I see certain corners being cut, and like, cost is a huge factor, of course, but I see certain areas getting shortchanged, perhaps, on the brand not showing up consistently on across all mediums. Intermittent, sporadic. There's all different ways of different types of language and posting of stuff or talking about subjects which are not relevant to the target audience. I think that can really jeopardize a lot of the hard work that you say are important for the brand or product, service, whatever. But really, you're not living and breathing that if you're not doing it consistently. And I think that gets sacrificed a lot in the scale up, because yourself, businesses fight or flight, putting out lots of fires, and the communication can often suffer externally. And I think that's often what gets what's the word, like, hampered, or not given the bandwidth it deserves sometimes.
I've seen that as well, and you can very quickly see a company, potentially a startup, and the invoice might have a different font to the proposal, or how a tweet goes out is very, very different to how a LinkedIn post goes out, and suddenly you're saying, well, hang on, I'm dealing with this company in different touch points. I've engaged with them before I bought from them. I've then onboarded with them, and I'd worked with a company a number of years ago, and I was helping them with an onboarding program. I think onboarding is super important, and I think bringing the brand in and bringing the brand guidelines into new employees so that they almost know how they need to write an email or how they need to write using the brand language, super important. And I remember seeing the internal induction meeting was a PowerPoint that had zero connection into their corporate brand. So you go onto their website, which a lot of customers see, and the website's beautiful. I mean, it's well branded, consistent. You could see it's been well done. And then internally, an onboarding program is being delivered with some Mr. Clippy gifts and things like that come out, and very basic things. And it could have been so easy to bring that brand guideline internally to the meeting. So just a reminder for people, if there are online, I am using StreamYard, which is some studio type software, and I don't always see the questions. But if you do have questions, you want to pop a question in, please do say hi, whatever. And yeah, that's it. So I think, yeah, challenging getting people to buy into the brand. I mean, I just spoke about onboarding and making sure that almost every person in an organization gets it, and uses that brand voice. Tell me a little bit about, I suppose, the brand voice, or some of these other, I suppose, personalities around the brand. So it's not a marketing activity. We get that, right? It's more than that. It's around that feeling. It's around bringing the company values in and the company voice in. I mean, any other anecdotes or stories on that side?
Anecdotes. Well, like when you mentioned like tone of voice, and I really liked your example there of in onboarding. That internal communication. It doesn't take a death by 1,000 cuts, where it's just many little inflections can really damage the brand internally. And I think documents in-house and going out to customers, not looking the part is a visual thing. It's surface level, but that actually is a symptom of a bigger problem, which is a loss of cohesion, which comes from a loss of alignment. And I will say one thing about the brand discovery sessions. It can really bring everyone together, and this aligns teams and gets everyone on board, and I think that's huge. Like internally, if things are wires are crossed, then externally that's going to be showing up in ways that we don't want. Breakdown in communication and so on. But I think and it's like I liked working with you when we did first, because I got to see how operations is like the fabric of a business. And I think it's really amazing that a brand from the offset and determining the purpose, that permeates throughout everything, and how people interact with the brand. It's taken away look. It's not treating things as if, customers will just figure it out, or internal people, new hires, we got some documents from like 5 years ago. We're not really, we're taking away that chance of, best of luck, hope it all works out. And I think having a plan in place really guides the shape of what the brand is going to mean to people. And I think that's what's huge. How people feel about the brand, that's everything.
We got some questions coming in. Henry, to answer your question, yes, just type it into the comments. I think there's some more questions coming in now. I'll take a look at them in a second. But it reminds me, and this is quite an interesting one, Shane. Sometimes there's an ego around the brand. Now, what I'm saying here is quite interesting. It's like, I remember working for a company in South Africa, and if anyone is on from that company, they'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And I was always on to them about, we got to put billboards up. We got to put billboards up. I actually love the brand. And, I was very adamant to make sure that we followed the brand guidelines. And I got close to the marketing person when I joined the company. And it was just very important that I was bringing that brand. I was in sales at the time and bringing that brand through. And a lot of the work they did, the marketing or the brand awareness, was created online. They were very digital. They did a lot. And I was like always on to them about billboards. I said, you've got to put a billboard up. You've got to put a billboard up. And they're like, oh, we don't need a billboard. And eventually I convinced them. And the sales team, I was running a number of sales teams at the time. They all came up to me and said, hey, Al, we got the billboard up. It's great. And it's almost like that brand stroked the ego of the salespeople. They could go out there and say, hey, we got our brand out there, and I thought that was quite interesting. And it's just very interesting that brand actually grows within, and it's something that's not just for the customers. It's something internally people can be proud of. So, I think, and this is a company that would have scaled quite significantly. They went from, where I was there, around 30 people to 150 people when I'd left, and still growing. I'm going to take a look at the question, but just another question for you. Yes, sorry, carry on.
It's interesting, the point that you said there, where visibility can be really harnessed for authority. So when we see brands that we recognize all over the place, if someone says that we work for them, or like it can, that proximity by what's the expression? Proximity by relationship by proximity, where it's like, because we're associated with outbound advertising, out of home advertising, then more people see it, and then we get proud, or we're more eager to talk about stuff like that. And it's just another knock-on effect of how the brand makes people feel, which is huge.
Interesting comment there. I've actually, Andrew has just, there's a question there as well attached to it, but Andrew has just asked a question around and referring to Michael Corcoran, who's become very popular recently. He's the Ryanair, ex-Ryanair social guy, and really got Ryanair on the map in TikTok and everything. I listened to a few podcasts, definitely recommended. Look up Michael Corcoran. But I think the question really is around how do you go from run-of-the-mill to actually being too out there? You know, there's a few brands that can get away with being a little bit cheeky, particularly the consumer type brands. But what is too out there, and how do you navigate, to Andrew's point, originality versus being just another company?
Yeah, well, I think having no tone of voice established within the brand discovery or defining those brand guidelines is a really helpful document for all outwards communication. Yeah, if you don't know what you stand for, then really you're just like wallpaper, you know, not very memorable. So I think by understanding what sort of sense of humor do you want to adopt, you know, if the brand that you represent or that you work for, you have, if this brand was a type of comedian, what kind of comedian would it be? What type of book? All these little pinpoints of culture, such as, you know, type of music, sense of humor. You see it with cars in particular, like Audi or Volkswagen, or you know, they really stand out. There's an element of superiority over competition, because why wouldn't you be saying that you're ultimately better than competition? But how they don't go too far is by understanding the people we're communicating to, the customers. Understanding that market. I mentioned positioning a while ago, and I hope this helps, Andrew. Positioning is, you know, defining why we're memorable in the minds of our customers. It's being significant, and ultimately that gives a competitive advantage. If you know what tone of voice you want to adapt, really having the cool thing about discovery is that it's like a health check or therapy for the brand. And you can keep everything in-house, and you can actually talk to people who, you know, the senior management team, and it's a safe place. So you're talking about sense of humor. You're saying internally, no, the customers, our persona, our target audience wouldn't appreciate that level of insanity. Like you say, Liquid Death, for example, a really cool brand I like. They're just selling cans of water, but they have an estimated value of over 700 million. And
they've called it Liquid Death.
Yeah. So it's not in Ireland at the moment, but it's US, huge. The guy behind it worked in advertising, and effectively what they did is they have cans of water, fizzy still. It's just water, but what they've done is they've leaned onto knowing their target audience. The typography, the design, the illustration of the cans is like a heavy metal band from back in the day, like the 70s or 80s or whatever. But they're really adopting that. We know our customers are tongue-in-cheek, our brand is irreverent, and we are allowed to have a sense of humor because we know our customers can accept that. So by knowing who the customer is, you know how to talk to them, and it's a decision that's made internally. Oh, it's in Ireland now, Barbara. Nice one. Cool.
There we go. Barbara just told us that it is in Ireland, and you know, it is funny how some of these stars are getting behind brands. And I'm thinking of two in particular. You know, there's obviously the Prime that came in, and all the kids went mental for the stuff.
Yeah,
on Prime, and my daughter eventually got hold of it and was like, "Dad, this doesn't really taste nice," you know. But then the next big trend, next big trend came in. I think Mr. Beast, who's known as a well-known content creator, and I think everybody knows of him, especially the younger generation. Me less so, but he's come out with a chocolate brand called Feastables, and it's like everyone needs it. And I was away on business recently, and first message from my daughter was, "It's not in Ireland, bring it home." And we brought it home, and eventually opened it. It was like, yeah, it's just chocolate really at the end of the day. So the brand gets the people can actually generate brands. I suppose that's another thing, and these brands can scale very quickly just off the back of a person, I suppose. Well, that's slightly different to what we were talking about in terms of helping companies scale, but it's interesting to see how people are helping brands scale. So
well, it can work on the other side as well. I mean, so that's influencer marketing that we're talking about there. But if you want to talk about reversing that kind of trend, if you take the example of Elon Musk, who's doing his work with I think it's funny, anytime we see X mentioned now, it's always followed by the text X, formerly known as Twitter. And I think that's an example of a really poor rebrand. And Elon Musk itself, divisive as he is, he's kind of he's doing more brand harm than good, and all those advertisers I lost.
Yeah, that's actually interesting. I mean, that goes back to the consistency. He's brought X in with a purpose of making Twitter more than it actually is, but it's end of the day, it's Twitter to everybody, and it'll be interesting to see if he leaves people to their own devices and gets a bit bored with running Twitter and focuses back to space and the other things he's running. It may be interesting to see if Twitter rebrands again. So yeah, that's interesting, and how it can go wrong, but maybe I don't know, maybe there's a method behind the madness. Maybe that rebrand to X has actually caused conversation.
Well, it's another closer to home example would be Free Now, the taxi hailing service, where I think they rebranded twice or three times. And but we don't know internally the struggles that the marketing department or maybe an outsider came in. But when a rebrand has been done that badly because you're talking about the rebrand, or even talking about it in the mainstream. When it's done well, we'll talk about it for a week and then we'll forget about it. And I think that kind of seamless transition is a rebrand that's taught out well.
So would you say that rebranding is not necessarily a good scaling solution? Do you think companies that need to pivot whatever should pivot but keep that consistency in place? Or do you think it really depends on the situation? I mean, is rebranding dangerous? Because I think that might be a get out of jail for a lot of people, saying, oh, we went product market fit, we didn't get any traction, let's rebrand, and hopefully the new shiny rebrand solves the problem.
Yeah, well, back years ago when I was working as a graphic designer, it was very common. We were designing, this was a lifetime ago now, but we were designing crests for schools. And it was a trend that every school that had a new principal, the new principal wanted to make their legacy happen. So they wanted to bring in a new logo design or the crest. And I think it's a funny example of that. It'd be similar today, where we have either new leadership coming in and they want to completely burn what was there and then put a stamp on the new marketing or whatever. But a rebrand in terms of that. It depends on many things. If it's like new product launches or stuff like that, it can be confusing enough when you're launching a new product, depending on how outside of the industry it is, that it could do more harm than good. But I think, as we mentioned with X, formerly known as Twitter, I think that's just an example of perhaps leadership wanting to, what's the word? Like just burn everything and then start again. And again, that's ego getting in the way of destroying a lot of stuff. You can do more harm than good if it's not done well, as we see.
Yeah.
I think a rebrand, people, they always use the word refresh because they think refresh sounds like less than a rebrand. But there is a difference. But depends. Every business is different. And, and like, an example of businesses doing that really well and establishing complete ownership would be to brands like Kleenex or Hoover or things like that, where they, like Hoover, for example, Hoovers are called vacuum cleaners, but Hoover just dominated the market so much that we think brand name before we think of the products or industry.
Exactly. I think Jeep is another example. I think everybody in Ireland calls an SUV a Jeep. And that's one thing I was quite surprised when I got in here. I'm like, they're not Jeeps, they're Toyotas or they're whatever. So it's just how people talk about things, which is quite interesting. Barbara's confirmed that Elon is about to implode, or hopefully I'm not about to implode, but hopefully she's referring to Elon. Shane, we got time probably for one or two more quick questions. Thanks for the comments so far. If there are one or two questions and we don't get to them, please reach out to us. I know there's some people from my network here, there's some people from Shane's. Connect with us, ask us questions, DM us, ping us, do whatever you need to do. I don't like to bring AI into every conversation. In fact, I tend to avoid bringing AI in. But in this one, it's quite interesting because are there a lot of people that are feeling like you're coming in as a brand architect, you spent years crafting this, your skill, you've got a really... you're involved in a cool agency now doing purpose-based work for brands. Where are you with AI? It's everywhere. Can AI do brand strategy? Like, I mean, can somebody just sort of get their brand strategy straight from artificial intelligence now? Or what are your thoughts on that? Big question.
Yeah, okay, quick. I think that would be terrible. But I think it's not something to be afraid of. I think AI is not coming to take our jobs. I just think the people who use AI will have better quality of work. I think AI is, of course, a great starting point for ideation, stuff like that. Generative AI. I think it's a nice little tool to use for a springboard of ideas.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, and I thought it was funny when AI, the one at ChatGPT, when that came out, suddenly businesses were using blogs all the time, and I thought it was just like, oh, this is mysterious. Why is this happening? But really, yeah, it's people know. We all know when you're reading content and it reads a bit stale. A prime example, just to go back to Andrew's point, tone of voice doesn't often convey quite well when it's an AI that's wrote to text, and you can always tell because we're reading something that's really, a bit boring. But
Yeah.
but you mentioned Bloody Lovely, who I work with as well. I mean, you're talking about purpose and things that are really important for people. And thankfully, we work. It's all about purpose-driven people with good causes, helping businesses that do good to do gooder, and
I
just
like
to,
that. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely, and really bringing that to the table and talking about it more from a place of being genuine. And I don't think AI anytime soon will understand the trouble and humankind experience that we talk about. Because it's not just people, it's not just one business to another. It's also people talking about people stuff.
Yeah. And Shane, it's being authentic. And again, I would also leverage AI, and AI has been very helpful. Like if I'm about to do a post, I'll refer to my brand guidelines or my brand manifesto and say, right, write me a post around this, the 3 or 4 things around this, using the following tone of voice. And then I get spat out something, but I still end up spending half an hour editing and arguing with the AI and saying, no, it doesn't look like that, or that word's better, or they haven't quite articulated right. And I'll rewrite the post anyway, so it'll still be original. So I'll use AI to get the launchpad idea and then
Do you
go
know
from
what?
there.
I use it to when I'm emailing my accountant, because I'm saying things and and I just want clarity. I just want the person reading the message to understand it. Doesn't so boring stuff. No offense to any accountants, but when I'm writing a message and I just want it to be understood, and I think AI has a really helpful place. There's a question.
We've got a question in from Henry. So I think very quickly, and this is not for me, it'd be for you, but how different should we be from our competitors, as people can get repulsed from seeing something that's too different? That's quite an interesting question. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, how can we be seen as different from competitors? Well, again, just to echo elements of Andrew's question, I think when we understand the competitive landscape, or what customers are using, or what's palatable for customers or people that we're trying to influence or trying to help, by understanding what they are acceptable with, what they're happy to see, and maybe in that understanding that market, we're able to see a gap. There's and people as well. People don't think about brands and our business as much as we do. People will only interact for seconds, and maybe it's something as subtle as a yellow background that is eye-catching, or the color red or blue or whatever. But like it's you're talking about seconds, and people don't get repulsed as much as we think they do. These things become really precious to us because we're so close to it. But ultimately, I think by being brave and understanding our customers and the marketplace, I think we're in a better position to communicate.
Look, it's a good way to leave it. I think it's being brave. And then you said something earlier that I really liked is, if your brand was a book, if your brand was a comedian, if your brand was whatever. So if you decide that you've got a very formalized business and you don't want your brand to be a comedian, then don't say that. Say if your brand was a paratrooper or something like that, something that speaks to what you want your brand to be. I think that's some good set of guardrails to ask yourself the question: if my brand was this, if it was a movie or whatever, and then you can kind of get the brand personality through. So again, I've worked with Shane in the past. I'm sure people have worked with branding people before. The folks over at Bloody Lovely Branding are doing some cool things. It's purpose driven. It's all around people, and it's Shane. I really appreciate chatting to you and the work you've done with me over the last few years. It's been important, and also calling out when I get it wrong, because sometimes the wrong font gets out there and I get a message from you saying, "Oh, look what's going on here." So just holding me accountable, I think, is what I've enjoyed over the last few years working with you. So thank you for the time. Yeah,
no problem. Alan, I enjoy pointing out your little mistakes. I enjoy that, so that's no problem.
Yeah, and exactly.
Just to say thank you so much for reaching out, having this call, and doing this. And again, I think this reflects your consistency to having conversation about things that matter to your customers as well, and challenges that scale-ups face. So yeah, thanks for having us. And I should do something like this and then have you as a guest as well. So thank you so much. And I'll be down to you.
We'll do a part 2. Thanks, everyone. And please, if we'll send the link around afterwards, but do ask questions, reach out to Shane, reach out to me. Let's connect, let's grow our networks, and have fun, and chat soon. Bye.
Thanks very much. Take care.